Some game developers have a pretty tame history, while others have had some pretty crazy things happen that led to them actually making games, and we want to talk about it. Today in gameranx, here are 10 insane stories about how video game companies were founded. Starting off at number 10, before DICE Los Angeles became what they are today, they actually started out as DreamWorks Interactive, which was actually founded and led by Steven Spielberg. Yeah, the movie dude, that Steven Spielberg. They mostly did games that were based on licensed properties up until Medal of Honor, which Spielberg actually pitched, and the idea originated from him being super interested in World War II, and also because his son played a lot of GoldenEye. Which I think is a funny way to pitch a game, and I really wish I could have been a fly on the wall during that meeting, because you know it was an amusing pitch. DreamWorks actually did end up making a GoldenEye game too. It was that weird rogue agent one where you played as a bad guy, which from what I remember, it wasn't that great, even though it is kind of a cool idea. But yeah, Medal of Honor was a thing because Steve really liked World War II, and his kid also really liked GoldenEye. Moving on to number 9, before creating the Unreal Engine and Fortnite under Epic Games, Tim Sweeney originally planned on getting into the computer consulting business with a company he started in 1991 called Potomac Computer Systems, which was open for a year before he decided it would be too much work to keep the company stable. But after making his first game, ZZT, he decided to reuse that company to release said game. You could actually purchase the game via BBS, and all of the orders were actually fulfilled by Sweeney's dad, and that game continued to sell for years. The last copy was actually sent out in 2013. People were still buying this game, and Sweeney's dad was still shipping them out from the original address of the first company, which is insane. Kudos to you, Papa Sweeney. You're the coolest dad. Next up at number 8, the story of Jason West and Vince Zampella leaving Infinity Ward to start up Respawn Entertainment doesn't really involve something cool or crazy. It's actually more unfortunate and pretty drama-filled. A few months after the release of Modern Warfare 2, which made $310 million on the day it released, West and Zampella were called to a meeting at Activision HQ where they were separately escorted by a group of security personnel to a conference room where Activision's head of HR and lawyer were waiting there, and they got fired for what Activision labeled as breach of contract. They weren't allowed to return to their offices, they weren't allowed to talk to their now ex-coworkers, and they wouldn't be receiving their $36 million bonus, which is an insane amount of money. And within a week, they were suing Activision for wrongful termination, which started a pretty heated legal battle. During that legal battle, West and Zampella founded Respawn Entertainment and partnered with EA, and soon after that began working on Titanfall. They also recruited a lot of their team from Infinity Ward, and of course Activision was pissed. So Respawn is definitely doing some cool stuff at least, even though this shitty thing happened in their past. And moving on to number 7, FromSoftware, the creators of Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and other games that are designed to hate you, actually started in 1986 making Office software. Except it was the Dark Souls of Office software. It was really hard to use. I'm sorry, that was a really bad joke. They launched their first game, Kingsfield, a few weeks after the release of the PlayStation, and at that time, it was the console's only true RPG, and it was also pretty difficult, no surprise, and it didn't go easy on you, which is obviously something that FromSoftware continued to do with their future games. But yeah, it's just so weird that they went from boring Office software to some of the best and most difficult RPGs around today. And coming in at number 6, it's crazy to think that a game as good as Cuphead actually wasn't all that good at a point in its development. Studio MDHR was originally a 3-person team, and Cuphead was supposed to only be made up of hard-to-beat bosses, which is still kind of what we got, but originally the running gun levels weren't in the game. The game was actually playable for the first time at a few expos in 2015, and it received a lot of negative feedback. And because of that feedback, creators Chad and Jared Moldenhauer, sorry if I butchered your name, I'm not good at that, decided that they needed to expand Cuphead and make it better. Both of them actually remortgaged their homes in order to get the funds to continue to develop Cuphead and improve it in the way that they planned on doing so. Obviously, they really cared about this game and really believed in what they had. They knew they had something special, and in the end, I guess it was worth it because the game released to very good reviews, and you could see the hard work that went into making it. And if anyone deserves that kind of success, it's definitely Studio MDHR. Even if you did make me wait years to play it, thank you for a quality ass game. Coming in at number 5, the story behind the development of Stardew Valley actually makes playing that game so much better. After hearing about this, I appreciate the game that much more because Stardew was made by one dude named Eric Barone. He did everything, even the music. all on his own. He graduated with a computer science degree and tried getting an entry-level coding job but never got calls back, so he decided he was going to try and make a video game instead. He was a huge fan of the Harvest Moon series and he decided to try and make a clone. He worked on the game for 4 years, working 10-hour days, 7 days a week, all while living with his girlfriend, who actually has a degree in plant biology, which is pretty amusing for obvious reasons. And he also had a part-time job working as an usher at a theater. But it shows that putting hard work into something that you believe in can actually yield something great, because Stardew Valley is great. There really isn't any denying it. Anyone that plays that game falls into it really hard, and this developer really has something special. Coming in at number 4, we have Sega, who, just like Nintendo, is one of the biggest video game giants to come out of Japan, except Sega was actually started by 4 Americans. It started as a company based out of Hawaii that started right before the US's involvement in World War II. Martin Bromley, Irvin Bromberg, and James Humpert started Standard Games to sell slot machines and other coin-operated games to military bases. Seeing that our involvement in World War II was starting up, there would be a lot of soldiers just sitting on base and they needed something to do. In 1951, the company relocated to Tokyo, seeing that at that time the government was trying to outlaw slot machines. And a few years later, Rosen Enterprises, a company that dealt in photo booths, was started by David Rosen, and in 1965 both companies joined forces and became known as Sega. After their first game, Periscope, was released and was successful, they began to focus on releasing video games. After that, it was bought, sold, and split up numerous times before ending up with CSK Holdings Corporation. So yeah, it turns out Sega is kind of an American company, and David Rosen actually stayed with that company until 1996 when he retired. I don't know, I just think that's a pretty interesting start for a big company like Sega. Coming in at number 3, before Nintendo made video games, they actually made card games. The company was founded in 1889 and they started off by making handmade Hanafuda cards. And after quickly becoming popular, more employees had to be hired to help mass produce them. Eventually, they got into other weird things as well, like a taxi company, making instant rice, a TV network, and even a chain of love hotels, which, okay, Nintendo. Obviously, all of that failed and didn't work out for them. In 1966, they moved into the toy industry and found a good amount of success there, but it wasn't until 1976 that they started playing around in the video game market, distributing the Magnavox Odyssey game console, and then in 1977, they produced their own hardware, the Color TV game, and then really, the rest is history. We got the NES, SNES, Super Mario, etc., etc. You guys know the deal. But they started out in card games, and actually, they still manufacture playing cards over in Japan now. So they really stuck to their roots. Coming in at number 2, Blizzard, who's behind giant titles such as World of Warcraft and Overwatch, was actually made possible by Blizzard's CEO and president Mike Morhaim's grandmother. Him and his partner actually needed to put up $10,000 just to open its doors and start Blizzard. This was before they had any games, really before they had anything. And Mike Morhaim actually took out a loan from his grandmother, who lent him $15,000 interest-free. And he actually saved a piece of paper outlining the amount of money that was lent to him, how he was going to pay it back, and it has the signatures of both Mike and his grandmother, Mildred Miller. Yeah, I think it's safe to say that his grandma sounds awesome. She didn't play games, but she was just a super good grandma and just wanted to see her grandkid just succeed, so she helped him out, and is pretty much responsible for one of the biggest names in video games today. So let's all give a huge thanks to Grandma Mildred for hooking us up with some awesome video games. Finally, at number 1, we have CD Projekt Red. I don't know if you've ever heard of how CD Projekt Red got started, but it's pretty insane, like how they started off as something so small and grew into the studio that brought us the Witcher series. CD Projekt Red was founded in 1994 by Marcin Iwinski and Mikhail Kaczynski. Not good with names, just keep that in mind. But before that, both of them actually sold video games. At this point in time, video games were actually semi-hard to come by in Poland, and they also didn't have any copyright laws over there. So both dudes actually sold cracked copies of games, all while they were still in high school. And in an attempt to make their business legitimate, instead of selling cracked games, they started CD Projekt Red so they could start localizing games. Their first big successful localization was actually for a point-and-click Ace Ventura game, oddly enough. And compared to the other localizations that sold a few hundred copies, theirs actually sold a few thousand copies. Soon after this, they approached BioWare about localizing Baldur's Gate, which they did, and they were very successful, and they began working on localizing the sequel, Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, but it was cancelled during development, and after some other localization work, CD Projekt Red decided that they wanted to start making their own games. Then, after acquiring the rights to the Witcher series, which is a very popular book series over there, they began working on the first Witcher game that did have a rough development cycle, but obviously it sold well because we got Witcher 2, and then we got Witcher 3. CD Projekt Red really just started from two kids selling cracked video games while they were still in high school, and then eventually it turned into this big giant thing. NoClip actually has a really awesome documentary about CD Projekt Red that you all should go check out. And those are 10 insane stories about how video game companies were founded, but we want to hear from you, so meet us down in the comments and let us know what you think. As I'm sure you already know, hitting the like button really helps us out, and if you're new here for some reason, we put out videos like this every single day, and the best way to get them is by subscribing to the channel. As always, thanks for stopping by to hang out with us, we really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time right here on GameRanx.